This is a story of how my auntie unalived my parents, not physically, but mentally and emotionally. So before I get into the story, I do want to say that I have some receipts and some pictures that I will be inserting throughout this video. So let's start. So both of my parents were born and raised in Ghana, and they initially met, in Ghana in the early 80s. And when they first met each other, I remember them both telling me that they instantly fell in love with each other. So fast forward into a few years, something happened in Ghana. I'm not really gonna get into all of that, but something happened in Ghana and my mum and dad wanted to relocate and, just start afresh, because Ghana wasn't the same Ghana that they grew up, knowing. So luckily enough for them, well, that's what they thought. My mum had two older sisters. I'm going to call them Sister 1 and Sister 2. So Sister 1 decided to send them an invitation letter to invite them down to London. So that's what they done. So everything went through, their documents went through, and they proceeded to go to London. So they arrived in London September 1986. They've moved in with Sister 1. And, when they touched down London, first thing that they done was do up tourism. So, they went to central London, went to Buckingham Palace, Trafalgar Square, etc., etc. Just living it up, having fun. Like, that was the first time that my mum has ever travelled. My dad has travelled previously because he was a soldier when he was in Ghana, so he travelled when he was in the army, so travelling wasn't new to him. But for my mum, it was very exciting, like, wow, she's in London. So now it's been a year since my mum and dad are living with Sister 1, and she is in a serious relationship now, and her partner decides to move in with her. So now, you can imagine 4 grown adults sharing, a small space. It wasn't ideal for both of my parents plus Sister 1. So Sister 1 and my mum and dad decided to, ask Sister 2 if my mum and dad can move in with her, because it was literally just her and her daughter at that time. Now she has 4, but at that time it was just her and her daughter. So Sister 2 was like, yeah, why not? Come and move in with me. So my mum and dad moved in with Sister 2. So things were going well, Sister 2 and my mum catching up, everything's going well. By the way, guys, I'm not gonna be saying Sister 1, Sister 2 anymore, because Sister 1 is now out of the picture. And I would just be saying my auntie or my mum's sister, so that you don't get confused. So now my mum and dad have been in London for a while now, just over a year, and they're starting to get a bit bored now. Obviously, when they was in Ghana, they was always busy. Like I said, my dad was in the army, so he was always on his feet. My mum didn't really work, but she would accompany her siblings and sometimes go to the farm, so she was always busy. So, it was a big culture shock for the both of them, I would say. So yeah, they decided to have a talk with my auntie and see if they can start work. So they had that conversation with my auntie, and the first thing my auntie said is, basically my auntie laughed in their face first and said, do you know what it takes to work in London? And obviously they didn't know, none the wiser, and she said, you are illegal immigrants and you don't have the status to work in the UK, so if you want to work, you would need to, require documents to work. So obviously my mum and dad were oblivious to how they can obtain all of that, and she came up with the idea of getting fake identities in order for them to work. So now the names that they used to work, they weren't actually fake, they were actually real people. So the name that my dad used was my mum's older brother's name, because he already had his status within the UK. And the name my mum used was her brother's wife's name. So yeah, they used that and they managed to get jobs. So my mum was working as a cleaner for an airport, and my dad managed to get a cleaning job for a cleaning company. So they were both excited. They were like, yes, like, you know, they're finally, you know, getting somewhere. They're gonna achieve their goals. One of their goals was to buy a property and, you know, to move out of my auntie's house. So, you know, working hard, saving their money, and this is where hostility starts and jealousy started with my auntie. So my auntie started seeing that they're earning, you know, small money, because my dad would offer to do shopping for the house, and he would give my auntie small money here and there, you know, to pay for a small bill here or a bill there. So she was like raising an eyebrow, like, these people have just come to the UK and now look at them. So she started acting weird towards them. I remember my mum used to say to me that she would try and spark up conversations with her sister, and her sister would just flatline ignore her. Like, she would just ignore her. She would not even acknowledge that my mum's talking to her. I remember my dad would tell me that there were times where she would just make little arguments with them. But upon all of this, they did not retaliate. My dad ignored it. And, you know, they just continued to put their head down and work hard. So I believe it was a year or two that has passed. My dad managed to get him a really good job as an underground train driver. And to be honest with you, like, I'm not making no excuses for my parents, but back in those days, a lot of Africans would come down to the UK, and because they thought that the UK was the land of opportunity, they would come down and obtain fake identities to work. Like, it wasn't a new thing. A lot of people were doing that. So yeah, my dad managed to get him a really good job as an underground train driver, and honestly, my mum and dad were thrilled, because they were like, yes, we're one step closer to our goals, to our dreams. And, you know, that was really important. And, you know, the focus for my dad really was to get out of my auntie's house, because he really could not take the hostility, because my dad does not like hostility. He was such a friendly person. If you really knew him, like, he was so down to earth. So yeah, I'm just going to fast forward a little bit, because there's a lot to this story. So I remember a time my dad told me that he was at work, and he came back home, and he went into his bedroom, and he noticed that certain things have been moved around. Things like his letters, amongst the letters was his pay slips, and he believed my auntie, you know, was the only culprit to do that. So he didn't say nothing. He just kept his head down, and he said to me it was like she wanted him to know she was snooping through his things. Why, I don't know, but, you know, those were some of the things that she would do, going through my dad's stuff, like just checking like how much he's getting paid and things like that. It was weird. It was very weird. But God being so good, they managed to get enough money to, you know, buy their first property, and that property was in Mitcham, which is in South London. So now the next thing that they had to do was sit my auntie down and tell her that, you know, they found somewhere and they want to move out. As you can imagine, my auntie didn't take it really well. She said to my parents that they're very ungrateful after everything that she's done for them. But, you know, my parents took every insult, everything that she said to them, and just said, thank you. Just thank you for everything you've done, basically, and deuces. So they left and, you know, moved out and started their life, you know. Now they've achieved getting their property. Their next step was to start a family. So my mum and dad were trying, you know, very hard to conceive, and unfortunately my mum suffered 2 miscarriages before she actually conceived me. So now she's pregnant with me. They're ecstatic, they're happy, everything's going, you know, right in their lives right now. So at this point, my parents and my auntie have not spoken. They do not speak. They've literally just gone their separate ways. That's it. So yeah, fast forward, my mum's, you know, at the last stage of her pregnancy. So she's in her third trimester. And, you know, one day they're chilling at home and my dad said there was a massive knock at the door, like boom, boom, boom. And his heart just stopped. He was like, we're not expecting anybody. Like, no one really knows where they live. Yeah, so he was scared. So he literally got up. So as my dad was about to open the door just literally pushed him back. And who was it? It was police. So police were like, it's police, we're looking for Francis Pons, police, whatever. And then my dad he was scared. He was like, oh, it's me, like, what's going on? So the police was like, oh, Mr. Apong, you've been arrested for, you know, dishonesty, obtaining a property by deception or something along them lines. I can't really remember what it was. But yeah, my dad was so scared. He was frightened. My mum, heavily pregnant, was in tears, like just scared. They were both scared. So as the police officer was about to take the handcuffs and pull it on my dad was like, whoa, wait, let's talk about this. Let's try and resolve this. But no, the police officers was not having none of it, and they literally slammed my dad down. And as the police officer slammed my dad down, he sprained his arm and he sustained a few injuries as well. It was really, really hectic for my parents. So yeah, both of my parents were arrested, you know, for that charge, and they were both taken away to prison. So my dad was taken to Wormwood Scrubs, and my mum was taken to Holloway female prison, and I believe that closed down in 2016 actually. So yeah, my dad spent 6 weeks at Wormwood and my mum spent 3 weeks at Holloway. So whilst they were in prison, my mum and dad used to always write to each other, especially my dad. My dad used to write to my mum more, you know, checking on her well-being, checking on the pregnancy, how I'm doing. Mind you, my mum was a month away from giving birth because, you know, she was in prison in October and gave birth to me in November. So yeah, this was all happening whilst my mum was in a vulnerable state. So you can imagine her state of mind. You know, even my dad, like, not getting to physically hold his wife, talk to his wife, you know, see the development, the growing of the bump, even though it's the last trimester, like every little thing counts. So yeah, in one of the letters, my dad wrote to my mum and said that he found out who was behind all of this, because basically my mum and dad managed to get lawyers when they were in prison, and my dad's lawyer obviously had to get all the witness statements and stuff like that for the case. And the first witness statement that, you know, was handed to the lawyer was my auntie's statement, and the lawyer relayed this information back to my dad and told him all the names that was involved. And yeah, my dad was in shock. He was in utter shock. So in the letter, he tells my mum that so-and-so was behind it, meaning my auntie was behind it, due to her jealousy of them purchasing the house. And he would never ever forgive them. Like, he would never ever forgive them. But not only that, my auntie got others involved, and those others were, you know, friends. My parents thought they were their friends involved. So it was like a little ring of them, and my auntie was the ringleader. So yeah, it was very, very devastating for my parents to know that, you know, my mum's own sister could do this to her and her husband. Not only that, but my dad managed to get, you know, my auntie's witness statement. I would insert it in this video, but the only problem is it is very, very old. Like, the writing, you can't really see the writing. It's all faded. But yeah, but I do have it. I do have it. So now at this point, both of my parents' mental health were declining, especially my mum's, and, you know, things were just getting worse and worse. And my mum, 3 weeks came up and my mum finally got released. And literally a few days later, my mum gave birth to me. And I'm gonna end it here. Stay tuned for part 2, where I'll go into more detail.